Welcome to Moving Iron with Casey Seymour and Greg Peterson, the podcast for anyone and everyone involved and interested in the business of ag equipment. If you want to understand what trends and market forces are impacting the price of your iron, you've come to the right place. Buckle up, it's time to move some iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by John Deere. We've got Greg Machinery, Pete Peterson here to talk about what's happening in the world of auctions and equipment. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing well today, Casey. How about you?
Doing okay, man. Doing okay. It's a kind of hit that middle of the road time of the year, like we've talked about in the past. We've seen some movement in the marketplace, so things are kind of peaking up there. And once a year, I like to do a show where we talk about things other than what's going on in the marketplace. I think it's it's a breather for myself as much as it is for anybody else. But you take a look at what's going on, and there's at the auction market, you see a lot of things out there other than just equipment. You see obviously pickups and trucks and those kind of things. But I think the one thing I like to watch sell at auctions, just because of what a new one costs, is side by sides. And I think those are I want one. I've wanted a side by side for a long time, and you start building one, and the next thing you know, you've got a pretty nice new car sitting in your shed that you can't drive everywhere. So it's
but you would have it. That's the main.
But you'd have it, right? You'd have it, and I think those are a pretty cool thing. But if you look at how they're being used today, a side-by-side is not just a toy anymore. It's as much of a tool as it is anything else.
Oh, right. It's unbelievable. I go back 35 and a half years on the auction side compiling prices. And, we used to call the category just ATVs, back in my day, the old three-wheelers.
The old three-wheelers, yeah.
Yeah. So we get tons of prices up. We've been tracking prices on them all along, but to see what's happened in the space has just been unbelievable. The growth, and we get into these, they have these vehicles, some design, those tool cats on the Bobcat side, and amazing what they can do. And it's interesting you brought that up. We got 4th of July coming up here, and, getting the job done around your property or going out and having fun off-road and whatever. I mean, these things they've become part of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, they are. And if you are, so I don't live on a farm or anything like that. I don't farm or anything like that. But what I do a lot of is I like to hunt, like to fish, and things about there's only so many places you can take your pickup, and then you kind of run out of space. I've gone into some places with my pickup that once I got there, I was like, I don't know if that juice is worth the squeeze or not. But having something like this would get you into those tight spots. I think another thing too, and John Deere's been on here and they've talked about their gators and the technology inside those gators now and what they're looking at. But you can do a lot of stuff when you're looking at from a farming perspective of just, going out and doing the geofencing your fields and setting up your AB lines and setting up your all the areas around that stuff, so you can have a good feel for what it is and how much that speeds up your time. Because I remember when I first started in the business, if you wanted to do that, most guys were taking their tractor and they were running around the outside of their field to get that fence in. And you and I both know what an hour on a ATV costs versus what an hour on a tractor costs. Right. It's significantly different.
Right. Yeah, it's been interesting. They've been, like I say, that over the decades, they've just kind of become essential, gone from that want to the need. Funny, Casey, how many times I'll be out filming an auction, and especially the day before, we'll be there filming and people milling around, looking kind of an open house deal, and they're looking at the equipment, and then they'll see the UTV sitting there, and they'll go, "Oh, now is that on the sale?" And the farm, no, we're not selling that. And they got the grandkids there, and I covered 2 auctions in Iowa last week, and both sales when I'm out heading into rural parts of the state. On the way to the auction, you see people steaming along the road on their, on the UTV there side by side. And just a vehicle, get around your farm, work tool. I mean, they're just amazing sector that's really grown. Hats off to the companies that have brought forward these vehicles that people, can latch onto and make part of their farming operations.
Yep, for sure. When you're out and about, do you see how many sales do you see, Greg, when you go to them? How many times do you see a UTV or a 4-wheeler or something like that? How often do you see something like that on a sale?
Oh, tons. I mean, if you go into machinerypete.com, click on the auction data, and click, now we call it ATVs, UTVs. I mean, it's an ocean of prices in there. And we never make any predetermination. So we still see some of those old Hondas. In fact, the old 80s Hondas have become collector items.
Mm-hmm.
We had a post on Facebook, I don't know, 6 weeks ago. There was one in New York. I'm not a Honda aficionado. I lose track of the exact. I think it was a 250 ATC, like an 84, right. But it was still new in the box.
Really?
What the hell was going on there? But whatever, it was still in the box. But $200,000.
Serious?
Yeah, $200,000.
Wow.
For and there was another one on the sale that brought like 15.5 or something. We saw another Honda mid 80s 3-wheeler that was, again, it was like $15,000. So, but again, that's back to my age when we were kids, beating the heck out of them and flipping them over. Unfortunately, it was super dangerous. But so we've got all those prices. And I remember being at the Farm Progress show back years ago. I think it was around the Great Recession or something. Whenever Caterpillar was making a move into the space.
Oh yeah, I remember those. Yeah,
visiting with well, that's a good example. A company like Caterpillar was moved to join the fray there. Give credit to Deere; they were in early. But I'm in Minnesota, of course, so we have a company like Polaris here. So very vibrant sector, and it's interesting. If we go back to analyzing trends with UTVs and side-by-sides, Casey, I was looking the other day, the back end of our machinerypete.com website, where we track used units on a volume basis for sale. Then we also track, search traffic. And a year and a half ago, there was a huge gap. There was big oversupply. And now, a year later, it's really kind of caught up to each other. So I think the dealers of these side-by-sides had like large grain farm equipment dealers have had a year of working down the inventory. And now the stock market's at an all-time high, so property owners should be feeling better. And probably a better time to be selling them than a year ago, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. When you are when you're out at the auction, how many times have you wished you had a side-by-side to stroll around and talk to your people with when you're doing that?
Well,
it's pretty, you see a lot of golf carts at auctions too.
We do. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. How about Rantoul? Wow. An armada of golf carts there every other year. But no, it's funny. We were talking before we started recording. I partnered with Farm Journal back in January of 2014. So 11 and a half years ago, but I'd started our Machinery Pete TV show 1 year prior, just on my own nickel. And I was kind of freaking out because it was very expensive, but I didn't know anything about television. So I found a production company in the Twin Cities to make the show. And it was a guy I knew back from college back in the day. And anyway, they had this existing show called Destination Polaris, which of course people see it all over. It's a great show. So they were looking for sponsors, trying to help me find sponsors for the initial Machinery Pete TV, and they pitched Polaris, and they almost signed on. We hit them kind of last minute, but one of the ideas was to haul a UTV around behind the Machinery Pete pickup, and then when we were filming at auction, ride it off the truck or whatever, the trailer, and well, they'd be awful handy. I know our film crew, like you were saying before, you can use them for anything, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I know our lead cameraman, Russ Natusco, man, he'd love to have a Machinery Pete side-by-side out there for us. Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. Yeah, maybe someday. One thing about the evolution of a side-by-side, too, is the depreciation is one thing you have to pay attention to on a side-by-side, right? From what it costs new to where they're at and those kind of things, which I think, in my opinion, I think the side-by-side and a vehicle have a lot more depreciation, a lot more common depreciation than a tractor does and something like that. I think they're a little bit different. Tractor depreciation really is heavily weighted on what the economy's doing, the ag economy is doing. But on a side-by-side, I can't tell you that I've seen it. You'll see some little dips and those kind of things, but for the most part, the depreciation curve is pretty constant, right? And But the one thing about a side by side is that they level out pretty quick. They have a huge dip, obviously, at the first couple of years, whatever else you see that just like everything else does. But that leveling off point is a lot sooner than I think it is on other things where you see, hey, when it gets down to this point, then it's kind of there for a long, long time. And I think that's one of the cool things about a side by side is that they have a big hit up front, but their mid range life, that middle of the road dollars value that you see there lingers a lot more than I think other pieces of equipment do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think our auction data would confirm that gut feeling, Casey. It's like you say, the cost of the new ones, just like everything, whether it's a tractor or a pickup, whatever, that does make the first few years, do its depreciation thing. But then I think you're right. These decked out models, they don't tend to keep falling like a rock. So one thing that I've always, when I analyze this sector, especially for our Wall Street crowd, it's interesting because, like say, the tractors and combines and stuff rides with the ag economy. How's the price of corn and beans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, these side-by-sides, yes, they're big in the ag community, but they're also, probably way bigger percentage-wise non-ag. So I always watch kind of the general stock market. You think of who are the buyers generally. And if you have a little land, basically, production farmers, obviously, but then like I live in Rochester, 130,000 people. So if you got some land on the edge of town here, 10 acres or something, pretty sweet to have a side-by-side and tool around and, check on your property and all that stuff, grandkids. So what I've noticed is that, times like now, we've been volatile here. Obviously, 25 stock market's been way down and now again way up. But bottom line, if your 401k is cranking, and you got a job in town and you got your 20 acres, 48, whatever, I've seen used values follow that a little bit. So It is different than tractors and combines. And I've always thought from the manufacturer side of a side-by-side, I'm not so much on the sales side, but times when ag starts roaring higher, like we saw, 21, 22, and market way back to whatever, 07, 08, 09, 10, 11. If I were one of those companies, I would lean more. I would watch the price of corn and beans, and as soon as there's a jump, man, shift your ad spend into the ag space. That's what I would. That's Machinery Pete recommendation.
Yeah, if you're looking at those things, you're exactly right. I mean, the amount of side-by-sides out there that aren't used in ag is significantly higher. Hunters, fishermen, right, guys who just want to go see what kind of a hill they can climb.
By the way,
those kind of things.
On the fishing topic, I shouldn't let this slide. What do you fish for, Casey?
Whatever wants to bite my hook. This is what I go after. No, I'm up in my neck of the woods up here. We got we got a lot of walleye and those kind of things in the lakes up here. That kind of stuff. A lot of
so the walleye. That's the subtle. That's the patient fishing, isn't it?
Yeah, I've dabbled in fly fishing, but that's that requires patience that I don't have, Greg, and that's
well, you're just busy.
No, I just have a short attention span, Greg. That's the problem. That's I looked at my brother fly fishes, and he does it a lot, and I've always compared fly fishing to archery, right? It's the archery of fishing, right? So there's a lot of technique, and I'm just a big dumb animal. Just give me an open face rod and let me throw it out there and watch it bob
up. I played golf
down.
with a guy up here in Rochester last week. He's a friend, and I didn't know he was a fisherman. He was fishing for brown trout on the streams here in southeast Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, that's two pretty heavy duty hobbies you got going at the same time. They're golfing and fishing. And he's like, well, I get tired of one, I go do the other. So it's like, makes sense.
Yeah. We live so where I live out here in the Painville, Nebraska, a couple hours down the road, you're up in the mountains, and we used to do it all the time when our kids were younger. We'd go up there 3 or 4 times a year, 5 times a year, and spend the weekend, or just the day, it's a short drive. But as my kids have gotten older, it's just there's stuff they're doing, and it's just harder and harder to get up there. So, we're planning to go back up there again, but it's you can get up there and hike up there, and you're 45-minute hike or whatever. You're up at a big lake, and we spend the day. And I try to get my fly rod out, and I'm doing the fly rod thing, and I end up wrapping it around a tree, the one tree that's next to this lake, or whatever, and then so then I break out my little collapsible open face.
What is what's the fly fishing deal? 10 to 2?
10 to 2, just like this, like that, and you got to flip your wrist, and I'm like, I don't. Yeah, next thing you know,
Pete on the fishing side is very limited. I have 2 brothers that like to fish, but about all I got is a pocket fisherman back in the 70s. That's about all I had.
Yeah. Me and my brother grew up fishing a lot and doing limb line and stuff back in Kansas, catching flathead and stuff at night, and that was always a blast. And we would spend the night on the river and try to. Few nights we knew there was storms coming in, but the fish were biting so fast, so big that we couldn't stop, and just barely got out of the tight spot with the river coming up. We knew.
Is there anything better than a freshly caught walleye when you cook that up?
It's amazing. There's been a lot of times where we catch those 21-inch walleye or something like that, 22-inch walleye, 23-inch walleye. And because back when I grew up in Kansas, they had them in the lake at El Dorado Lake. They had walleye, but I want to say 18 inches was the krill limit. I think it was, if I remember right. And so you catch those 21, 22, and you big long fillets, throw them in there, batter them up. Delicious. That and crappie. You can't beat it with a stick. Wow.
My father-in-law has his own little shore lunch recipe or whatever, and I tease him. I'm like, Ron, you gotta write that down. I mean, that's so good. And he's like, he just smiles. But yeah, it's a life highlight of fresh walleye.
Yeah.
So this is the thing about side-by-sides, Casey. They not only farming, but here we're talking fishing and hunting and camping. And they become part of our fun that way. So it's, I know it's been fun over the years when we see them at auction. I remember, so this was a Sullivan auctioneer sale. I think it was November of 16. The only reason I remember that is because Mrs. Machinery Pete broke her ankle while I was on the road filming 2 auctions. And I was like, oh my gosh, honey, I'll be home soon to help you. Yeah. And we were filming a sale that Sullivan's had in, I think, Palmyra, Missouri. And it was some of the most fun bidding. It was a deer, I don't know, what was that, 835 UV, XUV or whatever.
XUV, yep.
Hardly any miles on it. It was just like new. And we could tell, you go to the sale and you can usually tell, and this was a young guy, he was 19 years old or whatever. And he came up and he was like, hey, what do you think it's worth? So we talked, and I could just tell he was
jumping at the bid.
He was going home with that. It's just, that's all there was to it. So we're filming it, and our camera guys, we kept going back. And at one point, the young guy had the bid, and then he raised his hand again. And Dan Sullivan, this was back a live auction, and Dan, you know how good Dan is, right? And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he's like, "Young man, we got you, young man." And he got it. And he was so happy. Yeah. And it's one of those times when whatever it sells for, it's like, yeah, it's in the scheme. I don't really care if it went a little above the market. It's like that guy wanted it, and God dang it, he's got it, and he's off and running.
Yeah.
And that was just pure joy for him. So that was fun to see.
Yep. I love going to charity auctions because I've been to a million auctions in my lifetime, and I get how the flow works. And I always have a good auctioneer at those charity auctions that knows how to work them, just like working an auction, right?
Right.
And it's always fun to go there, and I sit next to this same lady every year, and she's bidding, and God bless her, she buys a lot of stuff. And I stand by her, and she goes, Am I in or am I out? I go, you're still in. And somebody else will jump in. Okay, you're out now. She's going to raise her hand. Right. And like, he's doing this thing. She's like, am I in or out? I'm like, you're still in. You still got the bid. And then somebody else, I go, now you're out. So then it's just fun to watch the excitement that people get in an auction frenzy. You know what I mean?
It's unbelievable. A couple of years ago, it was right before the pandemic hit. We were at a sale outside of down the road from Litchfield, Minnesota. Steffes came down to do a sale. And our friend Zach, a millennial farmer, Zach Johnson, came up. He's from Lowry, just north of where I grew up in Benson. Zach and Becky, great people. Anyway, they wanted to have a little fun, and they reached out and said, hey, let's let's do an auction video on different bidding styles. And now we filmed it day before the auction. So the Steffes crew is so big. They're a great crew. And they enlisted those guys. And we had different bidding profiles. But like you're saying, identifying, there are a lot of people, do I have the bid? Then there's people that hang back and bid with just kind of a tilt of the head or a little wink.
Yeah. I love those people. You don't know if there's, yeah.
Yeah, those are the hardened vets.
Yep.
I think of another sale. This was actually the first auction we filmed for our TV show, Casey. It was in, I think it was called Hammersville, Ohio. It was just outside of Cincinnati. So it would have been like April of 13. So before I joined Farm Journal. And we got there, a very nice farm sale. And it was Rick and Brad Williams, I think. No, Rick and Brad. Well, I'm thinking of Rick Williams. I can't remember which auction company it was there. Hess Auction Company. And I showed up, and there was a nice John Deere, like a 9220 four-wheel drive. Really nice, low hour. And a guy from northern Michigan was there. And he came running up. Hey, Machinery Beat, what do you think that 9220 is going to bring? And I was like, well, gosh, it's only got like $300-400. The highest we've seen is, and the same deal as the UTV guy in Missouri. It's like, there ain't no.
Yeah. There's no second place for this guy, right?
Yeah. He brought his trailer. And that's the trick. If you're not in the auction company, you got to figure out how to make more people bring their trailers.
No kidding, right?
Because they're going home with it if they're
going home with something for sure. Yeah, those are always. I've told this story on here before, but I remember going to auctions with my grandpa, and he was like, "Don't raise your hand, don't move your head, just." By the end of the auction, I look like a statue standing in the middle of this thing because I'm so scared to move when they're bidding,
Right.
And he goes, because if you raise your hand or you touch your nose or something like that, they're going to think you're bidding. And he goes, you just have to. He goes, right. So I have this paranoia now that's stuck with me from a young age. Every time I go to an auction, that don't move.
That's universal, man. I was the exact same way.
Yeah. End up with something that you didn't realize you were bidding on.
Right. No, your grandpa was wise.
Yeah.
I remember going out to first cover auctions in my early 20s, and same thing. It'd be freezing cold, and you got an itch on your face, and you can't.
Yeah. You always get an itch on your face too, right when they start bidding. Like you can't. Always. It's like you're sitting there and you're trying to. You're like, how do you do this without getting caught? Yeah.
No, it's fascinating. And of course, with online now, it's different. But like 2 weeks ago, we filmed an auction in Lime Springs, Iowa. It was the one people might remember. It had the 7230 premium two-wheel drive. It set a record like 94.5. But the joy of people being out at the auction again, it was just palpable.
Love it.
And
such a great atmosphere.
Yeah, it was because people were mixing and talking, and at the same time, do you believe what that tractor sold for? Or that was a buy. And it's just so much.
Nothing beats going to an auction, getting a really bad cup of coffee and a hamburger, and walking around, and just enjoying life.
The one that always gets me. Now I grew up. My mom, her parents were from. Mom was born in 1938, so she was after the Depression. But definitely the whole we ain't ever throwing anything away mindset of like my parents' generation. So when I go to auctions now and I see all the pie. Like on a 98-degree day in Kansas or Minnesota or whatever. And it's like, man, that pie's been sitting out it's always delicious.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, do I really want to dive into that lemon meringue when it's, and my mom would say, it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Everything's always, my grandma would say the same thing too. It's fine. Nothing wrong with it.
Pour the milk out and it's got a few chunks in it.
It's fine. It's good for you. My grandma used to set we're getting way down the rabbit hole here, but my grandma used to set fried chicken out on the counter for like days. They'd eat, and just like totally fine. It was just
absolutely. See, these are good rabbit holes, though, Casey.
Yeah.
And whether it's auctions or talking about anything machinery related. So hats off, on your podcast. You're fostering this discussion that we need more of these days. So thank you for making us think of these fun memories.
Well, we covered some ground on this one. We went from UTV values all the way up to fried chicken sitting on the counter. So we covered the gambit today. So
and walleye fishing, by the way.
And walleye fishing. We covered everything that you could cover. So that was good. Probably a good place to stop though, Greg. If folks want to have you come speak at their event, easiest way to do that is just go to machinerypete.com and go down to contact, and people get in touch with you that way.
Just reach out. We had some inquiries this week. I love going out to farm events or, whether it's talking trends or it's just even more fun just to tell stories from the trail like this. So appreciate everyone's interest or hit me up on social media. So happy to visit.
Right on. And you and I will be doing this podcast from the Yield Academy, August 21st, right? Is that right?
August 21st. Is that a Thursday, I think?
I believe that's correct.
Here in Rochester, Minnesota. Last day of the crop tour?
Last day of the crop tour. And you have a presentation time. Yeah. So I think the 21st, if I remember. 21st. August 21st. Yeah, we'll record the podcast. And if I remember right, you have a little segment you're going to do, and I have a segment that I'm going to do, kind of talking about what we see happen in the marketplace. So that will be a good chance to catch up with the people that listen, and if you have any questions or whatever else, you come out and check us out.
Yeah, so we'll get into the trend stuff, but then, hey, we'll have plenty of time, folks, to do fishing talk and all this other good life stuff.
We'll hit up what pie is the best pie to eat when it's 98 degrees outside. That's what we're going to talk
Rochester. We'll have fun.
Right on. Well, Greg, appreciate you being on the podcast, man. We'll catch you again next week.
Sounds great, Casey. Have a good week.
Right on. Stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcasts after these messages.
Well, there they are, mocking you.
See you next year, loser.
That weedy area that's got you thinking, man, I hate that spot. Wish I'd sprayed better. Get the last laugh with a sprayer upgrade from John Deere. Precision upgrades that can increase your sprayer's performance, like ExactApply, advanced nozzles to give you more control at more speeds. It's just one of the many precision upgrades you'll find at johndeere.com. Now, let's see who's laughing.
Farm Journal is going to hold the first ever Yield Academy for 2025. It's going to happen August 21st in Rochester, Minnesota. Listen to this group. Real advice from folks who've walked out in the fields. Ken Ferry, David Hula, Randy Dowdy, and we will get some market outlook from Dan Bossi at Ag Resource as well. Get the latest on what's working in agronomy, equipment, and marketing today. And that is the last day of Crop Tour 2025. So stick around for the final meeting that night in Rochester. Just Google Farm Journal Yield Academy, and that will take you to the homepage for the event.
All right, welcome back to Moving On Podcast. We got Rich Posson back on to talk about what's going on in the world of economics. Rich, how you doing this morning?
Good, thank you.
Doing good. Rich has got a great podcast called Critical Point Podcast. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. But Rich, talk a little bit about that podcast and what you got going on there.
Yeah, they should go to the new website I got out, criticalpointpod.com. And got some new memberships there, kind of split some things up, changed the things where people are saying they'd like something a little bit different. But there's a blog section, there's some free stuff, and the podcast, and just some all-around information of what I deal with when it comes to markets and economy. And then one major thing, everybody's so short-term these days. People buy and sell by the days now when they used to buy and sell months or years. But what I use as an anchor is basically the economy grows for about a decade, and then we have a primary recession. The stock market goes up 100 to 400% for a decade, and then it falls 20 to 50%. So I think it's a very good starting point to then break it down. How do we deal with that along the way? And we can also build it up into super cycles and society and culture and all that fun stuff as well. But criticalpointpod.com is the best place to go and get an idea of what I offer here. And
like Rich's podcasts are great. They're quick, 5 to 7 minute podcasts. Those kind of things. You have that description side, but you also can go over to like Apple, for example, and you can find the free version of that, which is just those real quick hitters. The paid side of it's got the graphs and stuff like that, so you can see a little more in depth what he's talking about. So make sure you check that out. Well worth your time to go do that. All right, Rich, we were talking about what we're going to talk about before we got rolling here, and you brought up a few things. Let's go ahead and kick it off with where we're at GDP wise and inflation. This inflation thing is just, man, I tell you what, it just won't go away. No matter how much medicine you give it, it just keeps coming back and staying right where it's at. As you're looking at this stuff, talk a little bit about what you're seeing and walk us through some of the scenarios you're looking at.
Yeah, so inflation and GDP run the same decade kind of pattern I just mentioned in the stock market. And you'll normally get economic growth for about 7 to 12 years, 1 to 3 years recession. And inflation normally will peak out near the end of the growth economy. In other words, the economy just gets too far and doing too well, and then inflation spikes. But occasionally you get some rather interesting things going on, such as what happened in 2022 with inflation, a little bit different timing along the way. And then normally inflation will back off when we have a recession. Sometimes, though, we get into what's called stagflation, and you'll even see times that you'll actually have high inflation, but we still have a recession. It's not a good economy. But most of the time, if it's not a good economy, inflation's down, okay? But right at the moment, my business cycle model is saying this year inflation should bottom. It should be higher next year. And as I look at the delay of this tariff impact, and a variety of other things going on in the world, that it does look like, yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. It's going to work higher into next year. And that's why Fed Chairman Powell has been holding off on lowering interest rates. He's just concerned it may take a while yet, but that inflation's coming. Well, in May, we got a tick up in inflation, and my model was correct to saying, well, inflation should be up in May. And that was the primary forecast. The secondary forecast is it took a stab of how high the inflation would go, and it didn't go as high as I was thinking or the model was showing. But at least model and myself got it right of the direction and the time of it, that inflation ticked up. It may not be the start yet of a bottom inflation. It may be a few months yet, but it does look like inflation is going to move higher into summer. Now that's, or into next year. So that's the rate of inflation. And the rate is, you were right, at the moment we're like 2.5% or something like that. Well, what that means is, in general, everything in the country is going up 2.5% more expensive than last year. So when people talk about lower inflation, they normally don't mean you're actually paying cheaper now. That normally only occurs during that recession, the bad times. All they're talking about is you're not paying, your price did not increase that you're paying this year over last year, but you're still paying more. And that's what's happened to American people. They're being squeezed more and more by this inflation. Okay. Now, the GDP and inflation have interesting characteristics. In the 70s, we had stagflation, and the economy had some measurements saying it was growing quite well. The American people were saying, no, it's not. I'm not getting anywhere. And they were paying more and more. And the stock market didn't do so well. It wasn't a crashing moment. It actually had some pretty good years mixed in there. But in general, it was just everything was held back because of that inflation. Well, it was pretty high inflation in the 70s. We ran it up to 10% or more, knocked it down about mid-decade, which is similar to what we just did this decade. But then we put it right back up late in the decade. And that's what's got some people concerned, and even the Fed Reserve. Are we going to see these tariffs push this inflation much higher? And so Fed is just kind of playing a game of being careful. Don't lower those rates just as the time inflation jumps and they got to raise them anyways, right? And so that's how they're trying to hedge themselves on the inflation side. Now, at the same time, the Fed just recently printed more money. We've actually got more money in the economy than ever. And they did that around March, April, I believe. I think it was the May report showing that. And that's what's got the stock market a little bit excited. What they're trying to do is help out the U.S. economy. And Trump's hollering that they're not helping him. Well, they are by that printed money. They're just not helping by lowering that interest rate. Not yet, anyways. They want to see this inflation cool off, and then they will lower the interest rates right along with that printed money. But if that inflation goes up, then they're already set that they can raise it up a bit more and already have a better impact is what they're thinking. It's kind of running a two-sided head. Yep.
Good question, Rich. If inflation is already still hot and they're worried about inflation going up even more, and one of the big things that causes inflation is by having more money in the money supply out there than there are goods to purchase, right? Why would putting more money into printing more money and putting it out in circulation help solve that problem?
That's the tricky part of this. They're taking a bet that the American people will be productive enough and that money is pumping in just to help build businesses. and it's not going so directly into the middle class and poor where they can spend, and now businesses can raise their prices even more because they know those people. So they're looking for a little bit of a lag or a disconnect there, and they realize they really got to change one or the other or both at some point. So this is kind of a short-term thinking for them, because what they're really telling us is they don't know what's going to happen next. And so they're making a bet against inflation with the higher interest rates because they think that's a good tool. And yet, for those of us who are involved in that modern monetary theory, we're learning, no, it's not a good tool at all. Actually, taxes do a better job of bringing down inflation. So they think they're controlling inflation with a higher interest. While at the same time, they think pumping money out through the banks will at least help business that helps the economy. But they're not trying to help the middle class and poor, really, that I can see. It's really just making sure that
they're trying to throw gas on the fire, but only get a certain part of the fire hot. That's what they're trying to
do. Exactly. So that sounds like a pretty tricky game to me.
It does. Sounds very tricky to me. Yeah.
So we'll see how well that all goes. Okay. That's the inflation side. Now the GDP. Interesting enough, first quarter, probably the Trump economy lost about $160 billion. That's my take on that. And I just did it on an envelope. So maybe somebody else can come out and say, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But we did get a slip in the economy. But I would also say normally we get a slip at the early part of the year. First quarter isn't necessarily the best economy of the year. So it may be okay. And some people would say our economy is so large that 160 billion really doesn't mean anything. But nonetheless, the economy slipped, and that's the bottom line. Well, as I look at this at the percent of GDP growth, a few months ago I said, boy, we've got some signals here. We got to get worried. This can blow up on us. Maybe we're heading for a recession. Well, now the model's backing away, saying, we might get through this tariff stuff okay. And probably not a recession, but it doesn't mean it's going to be a great time either, and we can slow the economy down. All I'm suggesting is the trend is down for GDP, so the economy could be slipping, eroding, and a lot of this tariff stuff still really hasn't hit. I've seen charts recently of the taxes coming in, and it's exploding straight up, but I'm not so sure. At the same time, the reason the stock market's going up right now, part of it, is that Trump has backed off on some of his tariffs. I've seen a chart that if you looked at everything he wanted to do, it was much more tariffs than President Hoover, who's been blamed for part of the depression of having across-the-board tariffs, okay? Excuse me. And so at least you now see Trump has backed off on that. It doesn't look as high. And so this is encouraging the stock market saying, just maybe, well, we've already seen the worst of these tariffs. The problem is we haven't seen the worst of the impact, and that's concerning me what's still coming down the road. I don't think we're going into a recession. I don't think something's going to break now. And I think Trump realizes he's got to get this all wrapped up this year, because next year he better be able to prove a good economy. Otherwise, he's going to lose the midterm elections. So I don't think he's going to want to rock the boat so much next year. But this year, I think he said, hey, we got to get this, we have 1 year to do everything and get it done. And he really has done a lot. So my forecast for GDP is sometime this year it bottoms, and it may have bottomed, but I feel more comfortable saying inflation has bottomed. I want some more data. I want some more time to say GDP has bottomed. But if GDP bottoms, and then we should have a better economy next year. It may even look better going into the end of the year on into next year. Now, the problem that I have is if inflation moves up quite a bit into next year and the economy grows next year, people are still going to be complaining that they're really not getting it. That would be something like a 1970 scenario. Maybe not as high inflation and not as severe, but it really would discourage people that, on one hand, we're saying the economy's growing, it's doing good. And then on the other hand, people are saying, well, I don't have much left in my wallet here, So this is going to be a complicated issue. But looking out to 2026, I'm somewhat positive on the economy and positive for the stock market. I do think we're probably going to bottom the economy this year. And if we haven't bottomed inflation, we'll bottom that, though. And that's what's going to be conflicting. It's going to be working against us. On one hand, we see some good stuff. On the other hand, we see this bad stuff. Now, yep.
So I'm right there with you. I feel like I'm looking at the ag economy, and it feels like the ag economy is slowly getting better. Corn's had a horrible run here last, but if you look where it's bounced back up since it hit the bottom, It's coming back up. We're up to 420. We're down to like 408 or something like that. A couple days ago, I had this feeling that as you watch this thing move along, you're going to see going into 26, 25 is going to be a lot stronger. We're seeing plenty of polls out there that show, farmers are starting to look at more equipment and those kind of things. I guess I'd like your feedback on that a little bit. Is that obviously a lot of that's driven by different payments and stuff like that are coming or have came, one or two. Thing about those payments is that they're all taxable, which is forces them to go out and spend it, right? Because then if they don't, they're going to pay taxes on it. But I guess as you're looking at the situation that we're in right now on the ag side of the economy, and you're looking at commodities and stuff like that, as you're talking about GDP and hey, is this? Because to me, I look at this and it feels like to me we've hit these windows now where used to be 3 to 4 years of pretty good times and 3 to 4 years of cleanup and 3 to 4 years of what the new normal looks like. It was about a 10-year cycle before you came back around. Well, anymore, it feels like it feels like this the entire economy, that those time frames have compressed down to where, especially since COVID, to where you might have 2 years of just a boom, just a massive boom, and then you'll have 2 or 3 years of cleaning up the mess from that boom, and then you'll have 2 or 3 years of normal, and then you're kind of back into the cycle again. Talk a little bit about what that, and do you see something similar like that happening that I'm seeing happen?
I do on agriculture, more on the grain side, just because of how the supply comes and goes, and then combine it to the U.S. economy and what we're doing here. Like I'm trying to be optimistic of an economy better by 2026 and pulling out of this year into 26. The interesting thing is, though, when I look at agriculture, I would say there's probably 6 to 12 months lag.
Yeah.
Got to get the economy better. Got to get the economy better before agriculture going to better. Now, one thing that can turn that around is have crop problems and get the prices high enough, so long as the farmer doesn't lose so much in the crop that it really does balance out of getting better. And history shows most of them actually do get a balance. It's only those few people that just really got hammered on the crop side that it never gets high enough for them. But for most part, they make money out of a bad crop time. And so that could bring them, like if it happened this year, then that would put them more in line with the U.S. economy. In fact, they'd be a little bit ahead of it. But I'm kind of thinking you're not going to get a crop problem to next year, following me, frankly. But the door's been open for some time now. Something may still yet happen. But yeah, right today, I would say agriculture is about 6 to maybe even 12 months behind what's going on. So if things get better with the U.S. economy by the end of this year, I'm sure the farmer's going to say, I don't see it. Yeah. But something to add to that, though, is where we can get some bad data is the cars, auto sales fell off a cliff here in May. I forget the actual number, but I double-checked again on a chart this morning here, and the model doesn't particularly like that. It is an important feature of the economy. It could be just a blip, but it's looking like it's some of the more better patterns that occur about 3 to 4 years or something like that. So it does make me concerned. There can be some lasting negative things going on there.
I read some articles about that the other day, and they were talking about, which kind of coincides with what you're talking about, but on the different side of it, that there was a increase in car value by, I can't remember what, 2.3 or 3.2%. I can't remember what it was, month over month and year over year, which maybe that correlates a little bit with what, the price of cars are already ridiculous and they're getting higher. So maybe you hit that point of saturation now where they're
finally snapped it. And people saying, I got to hold off here. Retail sales also were down for May, but it's that's a volatile number, very difficult to predict. So I'm not so sure that's a trend, but when I saw the car sales and then saw the overall retail sales down, that concerned me, something slipping in the economy, and yet here we got inflation up at the same time. And again, that's one of those problems where we're going to see, no, the economy's not good, and yet at the same time, inflation's going up. We got other things saying, well, it is okay. It's going to be a mixed bag for for the country overall, whereas everybody's going to have to pick a side. Oh, I got hurt, or no, I won. Something I'd like to talk about as I look at all this economy stuff, and then what are Trump's policies on a very long-term basis, because I study some of these generational cycles as some people get into, and really the U.S., since we're going into July 4th, by the way, the U.S., if you date from the birth date of this country, It's due for a similar pattern that has occurred in the past in Europe and Asia. We're just different timing because we were, our country started in the late 1700s, when some of these countries go back thousands of years. But we're in a death phase, winter phase, and hopefully we're reborn and going to pull out of this. In the next 20 or 30 years, we need to pull out with the idea we bring ourselves back together, get along, and have a decent economy and take care of one another. And the problem is some countries of Europe, like Netherlands, Finland, maybe Denmark, they have high debts, but it's that idea that government debt doesn't really matter. It's the private debt that matters. They're doing well, and their people are the happiest people in the world. Asia, China now coming on very strong, especially China. They've crossed the threshold. They don't have to copy, beg, or steal anything from anybody. They're just blowing away. They are inventing new things every day, and the U.S. is not inventing as well as we used to. And I'm just concerned if we don't do this correctly in the next 20 or 30 years, it actually screws up the entire century, that we're not going to do so well. Whereas I'm very convinced China wins no matter what this century. It's just a matter of, can we be close second? And I'm not saying we need to compete at all. In fact, we shouldn't be competing in a negative manner. We want to be very careful of that. All I'm saying is we need to adjust our own thinking here in our own country, that we're creating some of our own problems. And one of those is, I look at Doge. They really didn't find the waste that they said. They're wiping out divisions of the government just to cut costs, and that might be okay in the sense that maybe the country really doesn't need that. But there wasn't waste in the sense of running day-to-day business. The problem is they're cutting back on money going to universities and to the government for research and development. And if you go back to history of year 1800, when this country was getting going, this country in 1800 started government research and development, and it's been doing it right up to now. And it's invented most of the things we have. On my iPhone, on my desk, most of it was invented by government, not Apple, okay, not Android people. And so as I study capitalist business, I've realized, they're very good at producing something. If we need something, if you're a socialist communist country, you're never going to beat us, because if we need something, the capitalist society will get it done. They're going to build the factories, and you're going to produce in a fast manner. But capitalism isn't really that good on creation. And capitalism also has a negative side of increase in social unrest and crime and some of those things. And it does burn out eventually. And you let people get too rich and it burns out. But it's a great tool. It's the best ever invented by anybody to produce stuff. But the creation side, businesses would rather steal, copy, borrow, or pay for things that are already invented, so they can then put it right into their models and spend their money, invest, and produce it. Because when you do research and development, like Thomas Edison said, I think he said something like, well, I found 1,000 ways not to create a light bulb and only one for the light bulb. So these companies sat there saying that they could blow billions of dollars a year and not come up with anything, right? So they'd rather have it already done. Well, the problem is it's just amazing to me what universities and the government has cranked out over time. And I realize with these huge companies we have today, they do build pretty good research and development units. But for like the middle-sized companies all the way down to the mom and pop and shop business, they don't really have the resources and type of people or even the money to invent new things. And if we're not careful, it's like I remember my dad telling me when he was meeting with all his Republican business people, and I was just sitting in the corner listening, and they said, we're all going to work for the government someday. It's terrible. It's terrible. We're all going to work for the big government. And then I spoke up and said, well, it's either going to be big government or big business. And some of them actually said, you may be right. Well, here we are. It's big business and big government, and nobody else matters, okay? So we got some issues there that I'm nervous what Trump's doing on that side. May not fail immediately, but it could be part of a reason of failing the next 10, 20, or 30 years here, that we just can't keep up. Because, China, if you chart out their amount of patents per year, things they're inventing, they want to protect it, and they want to patent it so they can sell it. It's the chart straight up. And if you look at the U.S., we've kind of stalled out. And we were the leader last century. We ran the world in terms of inventing stuff. Now I'm convinced, no, this isn't our century. It is China's, it is Asia's, and it's going to be a few countries in Europe. And the rest, everybody else is just going to kind of stall out. But there's no reason for us to do that. We don't have to have the lost century. We're an intelligent, aggressive, hardworking people. We need to work smarter. I look at my life now, going back all my years, and I'm come to the conclusion I never made a dollar working hard. So the less I work and smarter, the more I make. And I think the American people need to do that. They're getting burned out on the hard side. But nevertheless, you still have to be ambitious. You still have to want to do some things here. And I just hope that if you know, maybe we'll learn that, yeah, we didn't need the government, didn't need the university studying things, but you know, sometimes you just have to gamble and waste some money and study some things that just don't work, or they work, but nobody wants them, in order to find the thing that they do want. And then our system will produce it and produce it better than anybody else. But I feel like we're shooting ourselves in the foot here and don't have the total plan correct here, which also brings me back to this tax bill that is probably going to be passed by July 4th or something, because they did codify it, I believe, last night or over the weekend, some of his stuff. But it does look like, yeah, you're making more debt, which I'm willing to say isn't real government. The government debt is not real debt. But nevertheless, what are you doing with that? Even if it's printed money, has nothing to do with debt. Where's it going? And it's just going to the rich. And you know, I've been at this for 30 years of the stock market. I love the stock market. That's my life. I make 90-some% of my money out of the stock market. But I got to tell you, I hope the stock market doesn't do much of anything for 20 or 30 years. It's just been too good for far too long. You need money pumping into the middle class and poor. I don't know what I'm going to do for a living if they really do that. But to me, that's how it should work. There's just too much money that the rich don't even know what to do with that money. And they put it in Wall Street, Banker Street, and they say, watch my money 24/7. You don't necessarily make me money, but just don't lose my money, because I can't get it insured, because it's so much of it, nobody will insure it. And that's their job. That's Wall Street's job in banking, protect all that money. And it used to work its way into the middle class and poor. It doesn't now. It's I'm starting to become a little bit of a fan of President Eisenhower, a Republican, who he loves 70 or 90% taxes, because he said it gets that money and pumps it into the system. Why? Because he was also giving them a lot of deductions.
Yeah,
So
they had forced them to spend it so that they would
exactly
they would get those deductions.
Exactly. Yeah. And see, we've flipped that on its head, where businesses still get deductions, rich people get deductions, not as much as they used to, because we tried to simplify the tax thing, but they still get that. But we then lowered the tax rate. And this suddenly made them lots more money, but it's kind of like they're always telling us, you know, we have to be incentivized, work hard, and we'll make that money. Well, we're kind of de-incentivizing them. It's like the rich are becoming lazy, and this money's just churning around in there. And granted, it makes some people money. I mean, there's middle-class people working in Wall Street, and they make a very good living, right? And they're making money off of that. But it's not doing enough of the middle class. It's not coming out of that system the way it used to. And I don't know as I have all the answers how to do. I have some people won't like them, but it's we're heading down a path. We're going to discuss this, and we're going to do something about it here. I just hope we don't, this next generation, the millennials are supposed to be the ones maybe to be the geniuses to figure this out. And hopefully they need others, though, to follow them, go along with it. I think it's starting to work, but I just don't have all the details yet, just what that is. I think the simplest thing I can say to American people is don't give up on the idea of taking care of business, because we need jobs, we need money. All right. But this country has evolved to it's business only. We don't have a lifestyle. We don't have a civilization culture. We don't even know who we are anymore. And we fight. And I've said for 5 years now, we're in a soft civil war. I'm a little concerned it might get worse before getting better. We need to stop that and calm down a little bit. We need to do why is China starting to beat us here? And I mean, they're really going to beat us, Casey. That's what it is they're taking care of people and business. Their stock market will never do as well as our stock market, but it's going to do okay. And you look at Europe, Denmark, Finland. Why are their people so happy? They're still doing business. Some Americans seem to think, no, they're not good at business. No, they're doing really good at business. Okay. They have very high debts. They have the highest, we complain about our federal debt. They have much higher federal debt than ours. Yet they're the happiest people. It goes on. But what they're doing is taking care of the people and business. And if we could just figure that out, I got a feeling there's just a few little things we need to tweak in this country and we'll be okay. But it's very difficult to please everybody. What is that tweaking? And it kind of reminds me of scientific projects people did. And this, I think, goes all the way back to 1970s. They took some mice and they said, we're going to create heaven on earth for these mice. And they did great, wonderful, extremely happy. Then all of a sudden, overnight, they just started arguing with one another, fighting. And it was like they were depressed, they were terrible. And yet the scientists did not pull away that heaven on earth. They were still getting heaven on earth. It's like the mice didn't even know it anymore. you know? Yeah. And I've said for recent years here, I've said, I'm beginning to think the human species can't stand peace or prosperity. And we like to crap in our own nests. So that's what I'll leave you for July 4th. But I am optimistic. We're gonna get through this somehow. There's actually some good. I keep saying, well, we're burning down the government house, at least if not the country. But sometimes maybe that's what we have to do in order to come up with the next great idea and to rebuild. So I'm optimistic we're doing, but I hope I want to see some signs by 2034. If I am seeing some signs that we really are making an effort and calming down and getting along together, then I'm going to get concerned that 20 or 30 years won't be good. And if the 20 or 30 years isn't good, we're going to have a bad century. And yet you look at our technologies, I've got to learn some more on this, but there's some people that study a lot of this generations and technology. They're saying, well, you get your technology boom first, then you get your golden age. You start living better and being happier. And it's interesting. Some of them are targeting 2050, 60, 70s. And that's for 10 years now. I've been thinking right around that time, we're going to be working less and getting paid the same or more. And maybe that's our golden age. Unfortunately, I'm getting old enough. I may only get a taste of that. But for the younger generations, they need those kind of goals and they need to speak up. And I realize the older generations usually could be the wiser ones, but and they're always telling the younger generations, "Oh, don't do that. That doesn't work." I got a feeling we need the younger generations to do things whether they work or not. Just do it.
And that's different now, though. That's, you know what I mean? It's like you look at. I had this conversation with my son the other day. I was talking to him about the same stuff my parents did. Still kind of worked when I was in my 20s that they did in their 20s because it hadn't evolved that much. I mean, there was plenty of technology and all those different things, but now I'm looking at him and I go from the time when you're in your 20s and when I was in my 20s, it's a 180-degree difference between the technology that supports life and the ability for you to do your job are dynamically different than when the only difference was the internet just kind of came out when I was. The internet had been around for about 10 years in 2000, early 2000s, right? Yeah. And that was really on a residential kind of mass type of thing. And so the internet just kind of came out. You're still using phones. Text messaging was a hassle. It wasn't even something that people did. And the people that did do it I thought they were crazy because you just had to push that stupid button 3 or 4 times to get to the letter you wanted to get, But now the ease and flow of information now is, a fax machine was a big deal when I was in my 20s, right? You know what I mean? And now you're looking at the flow of the transmission of information now is you can easily communicate via text message, you can email, you can pull it up on the internet. I mean, all these different things, and you can all do it from this right here, that right there. You can do all that from this right here. And now back then, it was kind of a labor of love a little bit to get that information to go to someplace, right?
Exactly.
So I think you're right when you're looking at how that technology boom that we're seeing happen right now with AI and all these different things, and as long as AI doesn't, rear its ugly head and try to kill us all here in 20 years or whatever, but those kind of things that just keep moving along is the ideas of the past aren't going to work in the future. It's just because it's so different now. Same fundamentals and those kind of things are going to be in play, but that 15 or 20% that's different from the previous generation is a big gap, and that gap is so big and so intense that you have to think outside the box, and you can't continue to do the exact same thing you've always done.
Yep, I agree.
So.
Yeah, I really hope that these younger generations really speak up because, even in politics, you look at the parties, they hold back the younger ones. And this is one of the few times some of them, the older ones, they also on the politics side, they just worry about getting elected, and they don't
Yeah,
really.
they're trying to control the money, right?
Yeah.
Who has all the money in the society? It's not the 20-somethings.
You need these younger generations on the political side just say, well, if we don't get elected this time, we'll get it next time,
Right.
And just get in there and say, hey, we got to try this. If it didn't work in the past, it can work now. Or, hey, this is totally different. Let's do it. Let's try it.
Yep.
We really don't have a lot to this. This country could just withstand some experiments that don't go right. And we're the type of people that will pull it off and say, okay, now we'll go on to the next thing. That didn't work. And boy, if we could do this next few years, I think we can have a very nice time next 20 or 30 years. But it's just putting the right ingredients together. And part of that ingredient is if we can just calm down a little bit. So, like I know a minister that I was mentioning some of this stuff, and then I asked him, what do you think? And he says, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So, unfortunately. So that's where we're at.
I think you're probably right. Right. Good place to stop, Rich. Folks want to reach out to you, get more information about your podcast and stuff that you're working on. What's the easiest way to do that?
Yep. Go to criticalpointpod.com. You can find me on Blue Sky. Just search for Rich Pawson. I'm still on Twitter. I haven't been updating lately. I've been so busy lately, but I'm still on there. And an email, rich@ag-financial.com. That's a very, very old email for me, but I use it. So, chat with me, tell me why I'm right or wrong and what your ideas are. We'll see where we go. But go to criticalpointpod.com. You really ought to try one of those memberships and give it a whirl. I think you're going to be on board with me for the rest of this decade. We got some exciting things coming here. So
looking forward to it. Rich, appreciate you being on the podcast. We'll catch you again next time.
Thank you very much.
All right, stay tuned for more Moving Iron podcast after these messages.
Looking for more accuracy, more productivity from your current planter? Let's get exact with precision upgrades from John Deere. Start with Exact Emerge and get accurate singulation and spacing at 10 miles per hour. Or choose Exact Shot to promote early root growth and cut fertilizer costs. And with Furrow Vision, save time by verifying seed depth right from your cab. Visit johndeere.com/planter upgrades and see why nothing runs like a deer.
All right, welcome back to Moving Iron Podcast. I got Aaron Fennell on here to talk about what's happened in the world of the equipment marketplace. And Aaron, how you doing?
Good. It's a lovely beginning of July day. Happy summer.
It is. I can't believe it's already July. June.
And I believe technically like today is the longest day of daylight. It actually is not the summer solstice day. 2 weeks later is the actual longest, most daylight hours.
Really, that's different than anything I've ever heard in my life.
Yep, I believe I saw that on social media, but it was shared by something. It was shared by something with a sciencey name. So
okay. Right.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's factual.
Yeah. Well, if you saw it on Twitter, it's got to be true. You know what I mean?
There you go.
You know what I mean? It's got to be true. Right on. All right. So this is typically the time of the year when you start seeing things start to open up, right? First 6 months of the year, everyone kind of tests the water, see where things are at, starts moving the needle, and then whatever happens this time of the year kind of sets the stage for what happens for the remainder part of the year. This is also the time of the year when you start seeing folks in international marketplaces start showing up and asking for, hey, can we get this? Can we get this? Can we get this? Because it takes 2 to 3 months for it to get to me.
Right.
And then I'll need to use it. I need to put it back together. So if you could put different colored tape on each piece, that way I know where it goes.
Right.
And get it over to me. That would give me the opportunity to get that thing ready for harvest. That way I can use it and get it ready to go. So a few, you and I have sent stuff all over the world. We've got, I think the only continent that I haven't sent stuff to is obviously Antarctica, but there's the thing about the export marketplace is that it is a labor of love. You have to work it harder than anything else because people come and go. They show up they have all the money in the world one day and then they don't the next. And then you don't hear from them for 4 or 5 or 6 months. And then all of a sudden they're back and they're ready to buy something. And
not only are they back, they're back like they never left.
Yeah. It's like, hey, where's the tractor?
Like, hey, the other day we were talking about such and such and you're like, no, it's November. That email says May.
Yeah. So this is the time of year where you start seeing those kind of things happen.
We were on holiday. I apologize.
Yeah. So, good friend of the show. I always want to say that. Good friend of the show. Blake Bina. He's a export specialist in Minnesota. Works for a company called Pro Exports, and he sent me an email talking about Argentina. So for a long time, Brazil and Argentina both were tough countries to get stuff into, and Brazil recently switched that up to where they could get some imports from different countries of used equipment, and Argentina the same way. They just opened that up, so you're starting to see things move in there. So I think kind of what I want to talk about today was just a little bit of some of the opportunities that may exist out there and what those opportunities look like. And there's hot and cold spots all over the world. You get a hot spot. You know, when I first started in this business, Ukraine was everybody was, you couldn't get enough stuff to go to Ukraine.
Right.
And obviously there's not that you can't send stuff to Ukraine now. It's just a little tougher than it was before.
You can still send stuff. Now you just duck and weave.
That's right. And so you've got that going for you. And you've got China has come up, and over the last 6 years have just started consuming a lot of complete machines sent over to China. There for the longest time, they were getting a lot of parts and those kind of things, but a lot of stuff there. You talk to the guys down south in cotton country, and you see a lot of cotton pickers and those kind of things getting shipped over to China. So long story short is this: if you're looking at a way to really bolster your inventory, sell of your inventory, the international marketplace is a great way to do that. And the reason I say that is, you know, in the United States, there's a thing called the washout cycle is from the time you sell the new piece all the way through the end, what that looks like and how that whole thing works. Each piece that falls in there till you get to cash, right? So you're trying to get your machine to turn into cash, no trade, right? The great thing about the international marketplace, we don't take a lot of trades coming in from anywhere else, right? They're just, you ship it over there and you get cash on the backside. I've always kind of looked at it at for every one machine that I sell and internationally, it probably takes 2 to 3 machines out of your inventory from a washout cycle perspective. Just if you're looking at it, and it really depends on what you're selling. But most of the stuff that you sell is falling into that third, late second, early third, beginning of the fourth trade kind of middle part there. That's what you're looking at, and that's going to be, like anywhere between a 5 to 7 year old machine is typically a good.
10-year-olds are always real popular.
Yep.
7 to 10.
7 to 10, and some of the stuff on the newer side is you're looking at some 5-year-old stuff that falls in there. So that 5 to 10 year range, but the meat of it is that 7 to 10 year old stuff. When you are dealing with those guys, the easiest thing to do and the easiest thing to understand is understand what their farming practices are like and understand what they're trying to accomplish when they're there, when you're working through that. So, Aaron, you send a lot of stuff overseas. When you're watching, when those calls start coming in from wherever, how are you following through that? Because you kind of have to take them all with a grain of salt, right? Mm-hmm. Not because, I mean, if you get 20 of them come through, 3 of them might actually materialize.
Or one.
Yeah, true. Or one, right? But it's a small margin of stuff that's out there.
It is. It is small. For every, I would say it's honestly probably a little more bleak than that, Casey. I would say for every 20 emails you get, 1 is legit. And then you run with that one, and then you do that another 10 times, and then out of those deals, 1 of those units is gone. So you start with a really big white funnel at the top, and it gets really, really little at the bottom. The biggest thing with export sales is knowing how to handle all the processes down the line. And I don't mean your paperwork processes. I mean the stuff that matters,
right?
The physical processes of the machine. Yeah. How good are your guys at cleanup? How good are your guys at tear down? All of that all through. How does that fit on a truck? Biggest thing on earth, does it or does it not fit in a box?
Yeah.
And how hard is it to get to fit in a box? Is it cheaper to shove it in that box with lots of tear down or pay to roll on, roll off on the ship?
Right.
Which is two different freight methods.
Mm-hmm.
Containerized shipping, if you have the facilities, the equipment, whatever, to shove stuff in a box, which in export lingo, that's what it's called. When you can put stuff in a container and ship it, global shipping is not very expensive.
No, it's really cheap. It's comparatively, right?
Yeah, considering you're on a boat crossing the ocean for a month, however many miles that is, it's pretty cheap.
Or you might have if you have a large tractor, sprayer, combine, something like that, you can spend $20,000 to $30,000 to send something over across the water.
Right.
Some of
I
those
was going to
stuff,
say bare minimum 10 to 15 versus anything in a box is 3 to 5.
Right. Now, some of that stuff, you'd be amazed what they can fit in a box. I mean, I've seen entire combines get shoved in a container.
Back to my point, you can shove a 9600 in a box, but you can't shove a rotor in a box.
Yeah.
That's the break. That's the break. But so
I even saw guys put 10 round balers in a container one time.
Yeah, and you can it's like playing Tetris inside of a box.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
Okay, put the toolbars in this corner and then put the units in and then shove the tires up in this corner and then over in this corner put
It's an art.
It is. It is an art. So are your guys good at playing Tetris? Are they good at tear down? All of that. There's so much goes into it that if you, as the guy selling it to them, know all those processes down the line, it makes it so much easier. Because it's just like any deal, just like you go to the car dealer. Oh, I'm just going to buy this pickup. I'm ready. Well, let me go talk to my manager. And died. Right there, the deal's dead. Lost all its momentum. Every time you gotta, let me go check with the shop, it loses a little momentum.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I have found with selling export is it's almost like you have to keep them paying attention. Think of it.
Well, yeah, because they're always trying to find something better.
If you're a parent, think of that 6-year-old that's all hyper. It's the 23rd of December and you're trying to have a discussion with them. That's kind of what it is. Like, okay, one thing at a time. Here we go, And if you have things, if you know the processes and you can keep it just bing, 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 bing down the line, that has a substantial impact on actually getting it out of here.
Yep, for sure. One other thing too about that, when you're looking at the export stuff, is that you got to understand that they're getting pricing from you. They're getting pricing from everybody else too, right?
Right.
So anyone that'll entertain them to listen to what they have to say.
Well, and different caliber of machines go different places.
Sure. Yeah.
And real quick, I don't consider Mexico or Canada the export market. Because they're actually complete opposite things. Right. Here's American agriculture. Things go, this stuff goes to Canada. This stuff goes to Mexico.
Right.
Just like the map shows you.
Right. Yeah.
So, but to that point, you'll see 10 to 20-year-old stuff go to Africa.
Sure.
Which honestly is where a lot of the Chinese buyers are actually sending the machinery. There is machinery going to China, obviously.
Yeah, it's going to where they're using it at.
Right. But the Chinese has a big presence in the African in the next country to try and farm Africa brigade.
Yeah.
We got to experiment with it when England was trying. Not in the 1700s, but in the 2000s.
Yep.
And that didn't work. So everybody's always, that Africa is always let's reinvent the wheel over there. Yet there's a whole lot of Africa that doesn't get taken into account, it seems.
Yeah. So I think one thing too,
real quick to that point, Casey, with Argentina being opened, I have not had anybody ask for anything that isn't an 8R, not an 8345R, an 8R 340. Like everything. And I've had numerous Argentinian dealers reach out. We've been in contact back and forth on machines, and every single one of them is a def rig. Whereas what was the big thing with Ukraine? No def. Oh, right. Heavens. It's got to be like tier 0 to send it over there.
Yep.
Like their diesel fuel looks like Jell-O.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And I think one thing, back to your point, I think the understanding important is what can you break down, what can you containerize yourself, and this kind of thing. Because there's companies out there that can do that for you, like Machinery Management Systems, for example, MMS up in South Dakota and
Minnesota, North Dakota, and Charleston, Illinois.
There you go, Charleston, Illinois.
Yep,
they do a great job.
That's what they do for a living.
That's what they do is they containerize and ship, and they also help you with freight. And that's the other side of it too. Unless you have a degree in logistics and or have someone that knows how to do that, don't try to do that on your own. Just work a freight forwarder and have them take care of it, because they understand the ins and outs and those kind of things. And I can't tell you how many things I've got hang up at ports where I didn't have the right, I didn't have the right TPS form and you know what I mean? And like that kind of stuff where you had,
did you get the memo about the cover letter?
Yeah, and it was just stuff like that. That just you wouldn't think would be that big of a deal, but man, it is a really big deal.
Oh, here's one for you. Things can happen in export. Sell a 680 going to South America. One of the nicer 680s we have. While it's on the boat. And this is funny when you listen to one of Blake's presentations, he talks about stuff like this. While the combine is on the boat, somebody hits it and it drains 5 gallons of hydraulic oil out on the deck of the boat. Who gets blamed first?
Well, it's always the
shipper. It's the machinery dealer, man.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So then you get to work through things like that. No, I'm going to tell you this is the biggest thing when you're exporting.
Pictures.
There is no such thing as too many pictures.
Yeah.
Oh,
gotta have them pictures, baby.
You want to talk about the most CYA experience that you'll ever do? I tell you what, doing export work will make you a better local salesman with your paperwork.
Oh, yeah. You have so much to do there. Yeah.
There's only 4 forms?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's the key to that too, is making sure that you keep things moving forward and keep the documentation process in place. So,
right. And then you have different, which you can speak to this, Casey. I've talked to guys there about machines. We have a mutual buddy from there, and they have entrance regulations like no other country on earth. Australia.
Oh, yeah. They do have a fair amount of regulations to get something in there.
To the point where, didn't you say like you had to almost toothbrush the cracks on tractors to get all the dirt out and everything?
Yeah, so I had that's a good point. So tractors going over the cracks on there, that dirt and stuff like that. I had to ship to a port to get it
West Coast somewhere, right? Long Beach or something.
I can't remember where it was at, but it was can't remember what they call it. Certified, get it certified cleaned, right? And when they certify it, they give it a document when it gets there, it goes through. Because if you don't have things pass through inspection and customs from a foreign debris perspective in Australia, they ship it to New Zealand or Tanzania or someplace, I can't remember where it is, and it sits there till it gets cleaned and it comes back. Meanwhile, you're paying for that.
Tasmania,
there you go. Tasmania, and you're paying for all that while it sits there. So I shipped this is an MT-65C, if I remember right, and the tracks were normal what you would expect for the hours on the tracks, right? They weren't tore up by any means. They were just they were used tracks. And I get down there, and the guy says when I'm shipping it, the guy that buying it from me, he goes, just charge me for a new set of tracks because it'll be better. That way, when it gets to the port, we can take the tracks off and put the new ones on. It'll clear customs. I'm like, why would you want to spend at the time $15,000 more for? He goes, just trust me, just give me the set of tracks and put them with the machine. Because sure enough, that what they would have done is they would have had to take like a Dremel tool and gone through every crack and got out every piece of dirt in there. And I'm like, really? That's crazy. So little things like that are another thing too that you need to make sure you understand when you're doing those kind of things. Is there's a lot of quarantine countries out there that, you know, wind does blow, but obviously not in that country because they don't get anything anybody else gets. So
right.
So those kind of things like that. I had a MacDon FD70 head that I shipped to Australia, and I mean, we had that thing shining, and they took off the caps off the end on the frame tubes,
right?
And there was dirt inside that just kind of got in there, and it got held up in customs because of that.
Oh, yeah.
It cost me an extra $2,500 to get that hose worth of, you know, 36-foot head, right?
Exactly.
That top beam, right? Someone spray of water through there. That cost me $2,500. So things like that are what you got to really pay close attention to when you're doing that, because that was you know, you talk about you know, you have to pay for your education. I paid for a lot of education going through the export marketplace, a lot more than what it cost me to go get my regular college degree in some cases.
Which is good because you went through them growing pains before we met, so you were able to shepherd me far better.
Yeah. So, but I think the thing about the import market or the export marketplace is if you can spend some time there and learn that, it gives you an opportunity to open up some doors to other things. Now, so many other things that fluctuate in that marketplace too is what's the dollar doing, those kind of things. That has a big impact on it because in the United States, we don't think about the dollar fluctuates. We don't think anything of it, right? It doesn't affect our day to day. But if you are in, if you're in South Africa, for example, where I think it's 26 to 1 or what, I have to go back and look, the South African rand versus the US dollar, that dollar moves up or down or whatever else. And there are guys trying to buy something and it goes from 26 to 1 to 28 to 1. That's a big deal. You know, you know, but if it goes back the other way, it's a win, right? So you have some people that are trying to play the market there too. So when you watch
the value of the dollar is the biggest impact. That has a 10 to 1 impact compared to commodity prices, whether or not they're going to buy that American machine.
Yeah, you could have the best of world economy and have the slowest economics or slowest export in the world just because of where the dollar and how it translates in. So
to the point when I hear on the news, the dollar is strengthening, it's like, no combines to Canada this year.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing that happens when you're looking at you know, export corn and soybeans and everything else, right?
Right.
All the same things come into play. So just stuff to pay attention to. Well worth your time to do that. If you want to jump into the export marketplace, I would absolutely tell you to reach out to U.S. Commercial Services. Every state has a representative. They can get you in touch with all the embassies around the world that have staff in play there to help execute and support the export of U.S. goods into other countries. So I've done that before. I've sat in the embassy in Romania and Hungary and those kind of places like that, and got and had people come visit you and talk through stuff, and you know, some of that stuff worked out, some didn't. So, but it's just the thing about the export marketplace is that it's very much it's a crapshoot, right? One person flakes out on you, the next person that you think may be flaking out on you is the person that actually buys a bunch of stuff from you. So, it's just like anything else that you're dealing with. So.
And if you're at the embassy, you might as well get a suite.
Might as well, for sure. Absolutely. Like, where are you going with that? All right, man. Good place to stop, Aaron. Folks want to reach out to you.
Days, everybody.
If folks want to reach out to you and get some more of your High Plains wholesale super duper offers, what's the best way to do that?
Super duper offers. Well, you can look me up on High Plains Wholesale Equipment on Facebook. I'm also on Facebook by my name and on Twitter, Aaron Fintel. You can call me or text me, 308-760-1193. or you can shoot me an email, afintel@21equip.com.
Right on. Aaron, appreciate you being on the podcast. I'm Casey Seymour. You can find me Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know, I'm all over the place. Either Moving Iron LLC or Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out there. Go to AgWeb to hear the audio version of this podcast. Go to the Farm Journal YouTube channel to see the video version of this. Also, the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Austin, Texas, September 24th through 26th. If you're dealing, you want to go to that, go to the AgWeb page, click events, and you'll see the Moving Iron Summit pop up there. All the information, who's going to be talking, all the hotel information, all those kind of things are all up and ready for people to start signing up for. We got probably one of the largest groups I've seen so far sign up so far this early. So looking like we're going to have a big group of folks come this year. Looking forward to that. Also, if you want to see me and Greg Peterson in person, we're going to be at the Yield Academy at the last day of the crop tour up there in Rochester. That's August 21st or 22nd. Check that out. We'll be up there. I'll be talking
Bring a Sharpie.
Bring a Sharpie. That's right. Bring your Sharpie. And we'll be talking a little bit about what's going on. Greg's going to have a presentation. I'm going to have a presentation. Plus, we're going to do a live recording of the podcast there as well. So looking forward to that. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Rich Posson, Aaron Fennell, and Greg Machinery Pete Peterson. It's going to move some iron, folks. Out.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. And remember, Moving Iron is available on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and anywhere podcasts are found. So until next time, let's move some iron.